2 years ago, I was living what most people would call a charmed life. I had a thriving architectural firm in downtown Seattle, a penthouse apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, and a fiancé who made me laugh until my sides hurt. My company, Vasquez and Associates, had just landed the biggest contract in our history, designing the new civic center for the city. It was a $50 million project that would have set me up for life. The man responsible for my downfall was named Marcus Holloway. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident smile that made investors open their checkbooks without reading the fine print. He was the city's development coordinator, and he had the power to make or break careers in construction and architecture. I thought he was a mentor. I was wrong. It started with small requests. "Elena, could you adjust the environmental impact report? The numbers seem a bit high." Then bigger ones. "We need to use cheaper materials, but don't let it show in the public presentations." I should have seen the red flags, but I was young, ambitious, and desperate to prove that a woman could play in the big leagues. The night everything fell apart, I was working late in my office, putting finishing touches on the final presentation. Marcus called me into his office on the 40th floor of the municipal building. The city lights twinkled below us like scattered diamonds, and I remember thinking how beautiful Seattle looked at night. "Elena," he said, pouring himself a scotch from the crystal decanter on his desk. "We need to talk." I sat down across from him, my portfolio clutched in my hands. "Is this about the presentation tomorrow? Because I think we're really going to impress the council." "It's about the bribes." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What bribes?" Marcus smiled, but it wasn't the warm, fatherly smile I'd grown accustomed to. This was something else entirely: predatory, calculating. The ones you've been taking from Pinnacle Construction. The ones that ensured they'd get the subcontracting work despite being underbid by 3 other companies. "I never took any bribes. I don't even know what you're talking about." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were bank statements, photographs of me meeting with Pinnacle executives, and what looked like signed contracts. All of it was expertly forged. But it would take a forensic accountant weeks to prove that. "The FBI will be here in the morning," Marcus said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. "I tried to protect you, Elena, but the evidence is overwhelming. You're going to prison." I stared at the documents, my mind racing. "You did this. You set me up." "I did what I had to do. You were getting too close to the truth about the real funding sources for this project. Some very powerful people have invested a lot of money in seeing this civic center built exactly as they want it built. Your moral flexibility was becoming a problem." The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Marcus had been running a massive kickback scheme for years, using city projects to funnel money to his cronies and investors. He'd been using my company as a front, and when I'd started asking too many questions about budget discrepancies and material specifications, he decided to eliminate me. "You can't do this," I whispered. "I already have." He took a sip of his scotch. "Your fiancé received some very interesting photos tonight. Pictures of you in what appear to be compromising situations with several city officials. Doctored, of course, but David doesn't know that. I believe he's packing his bags as we speak." I felt the room spinning. David would never believe. "Check your phone." With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone. There were 17 missed calls from David and a text message that made my blood run cold. "How could you do this to us? Don't call me. Don't come home. We're done." Marcus stood up and walked to the window. "Here's what's going to happen, Elena. Tomorrow morning you're going to confess to taking bribes. You're going to cooperate with the FBI investigation, and you're going to implicate only the people I tell you to implicate. In exchange, I'll make sure you only serve 2 years instead of 20. And if I don't," he turned back to me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood freeze. "Then your sister's medical research grant gets revoked. Your parents' mortgage gets called in early. Your best friend's custody battle takes a very ugly turn. I have a lot of friends, Elena, and they owe me a lot of favors." I thought about Maria, my younger sister, who was 6 months away from completing her breakthrough cancer research. I thought about my parents, who had worked 3 jobs each to put me through college. I thought about Sarah, my best friend since childhood, who was fighting her abusive ex-husband for custody of her daughter. "You bastard," I breathed. "I'm a realist. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. But we both know you don't really have a choice. He was right. I didn't have a choice. Not then. Prison was exactly as brutal as you'd imagine, but not in the ways you'd expect. The physical violence was manageable. I was smart enough to keep my head down and strong enough to defend myself when necessary. The real torture was the isolation, the constant knowledge that my life was ticking away while Marcus Holloway lived in luxury on the money he'd stolen. I served 18 months before being released on parole. When I got out, I discovered that Marcus had been thorough in his destruction. My reputation in the architecture world was completely destroyed. No firm would hire me, not even for drafting work. My savings were gone, consumed by legal fees and the fine I'd had to pay as part of my plea agreement. I found a small apartment in a rough part of town and took a job at a coffee shop. Every morning, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to open the shop, and every night I'd close it at 11 p.m. In between, I'd serve lattes to the kind of people who used to work for me, watching their faces change when they recognized me, if they recognized me at all. But those long, quiet hours weren't wasted. I'd spent every free moment researching Marcus Holloway. I learned everything about his life, his habits, his finances, his family. I discovered that he lived in a $3 million house in Bellevue, drove a Tesla, and had a wife who spent her days shopping and her evenings at charity galas. I learned that he had a son at Stanford and a daughter at Yale, both of whom he was immensely proud of. Most importantly, I learned that his corruption went far deeper than I'd ever imagined. Over the course of 15 years, Marcus had stolen over $200 million from various city projects. He'd used shell companies, offshore accounts, and a network of corrupt officials to hide his crimes. The Civic Center project had been just the tip of the iceberg. The problem was proving it. Marcus had been very careful to insulate himself from direct involvement in the financial crimes. He'd used people like me as buffers, and when those buffers became liabilities, he'd eliminated them. I wasn't his first victim, just his most recent. But I had something Marcus didn't expect: time, motivation, and absolutely nothing left to lose. It took me 6 months to formulate my plan. It wasn't enough to simply expose Marcus. I'd tried that route with the FBI, and they'd made it clear that without hard evidence, they couldn't touch him. I needed something more comprehensive, something that would destroy him as completely as he destroyed me. I started with his family, not to hurt them, they were innocent in all of this, but to understand the psychology of what mattered most to Marcus. His wife, Catherine, was a former model who'd married him for his money and status. She was beautiful, vapid, and completely dependent on him financially. His son, Marcus Jr., was a business major who believed his father was a pillar of the community. His daughter, Sophie, was studying journalism and had actually written several articles about government corruption for her college newspaper. The irony wasn't lost on me. I also studied his business associates. The network of corruption Marcus had built was impressive in its scope. Contractors, city officials, state senators, even a few federal judges. But networks have weaknesses, and the bigger they are, the more points of failure they have. My plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, infiltration. I needed to get close to Marcus's inner circle to gain access to the information and evidence I needed. Phase 2, isolation. I needed to systematically destroy his support network, turning his allies against him or eliminating them from the equation entirely. Phase 3, annihilation. I needed to destroy him completely. His reputation, his wealth, his family, everything he'd built on the foundation of stolen money and ruined lives. It was going to take time, patience, and a level of calculated ruthlessness that I wasn't sure I possessed. But I'd learned something important during my time in prison. I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined. The first step was changing my appearance. I'd lost weight in prison, and my hair had grown long and dark. I had it cut and styled into a sophisticated bob, dyed it a rich auburn, and invested in contact lenses that changed my brown eyes to green. I bought new clothes, nothing too expensive, but well-tailored enough to suggest success without flaunting wealth. The transformation was remarkable. I looked like a completely different person, and more importantly, I felt like one. Elena Vasquez, the naive architect who'd trusted the wrong person, was dead. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. I created a new identity. Elena Reyes, a freelance consultant specializing in municipal development projects. I built a website, created business cards, and even established a small office in a downtown building. Everything was legitimate and traceable, but it told a story that was completely false. Getting close to Marcus required understanding his routines. He was a creature of habit. Breakfast at the same cafe every Tuesday, lunch at the same restaurant every Friday, drinks at the same bar every Thursday night. He was also a creature of ego, and that was going to be my way in. I started showing up at his regular haunts, not to approach him directly, but to become part of the scenery. I'd sit at the cafe with my laptop, apparently working on important projects. I'd have lunch at the restaurant, always alone, always professional looking. I'd nurse a single glass of wine at the bar, declining advances from other men with polite but firm refusals. It took 3 weeks for him to notice me. I was sitting at the bar on a Thursday night, reading a copy of Urban Planning Quarterly when he approached. "That's some light reading," he said, sliding onto the stool next to me. I looked up, and for just a moment, I let myself feel the rage that had been building for months. Then I pushed it down and smiled. "It's fascinating, actually. I'm working on a project that involves revitalizing downtown areas without displacing existing communities." He extended his hand. "Marcus Holloway. I work in city development." "Elena Reyes." I shook his hand, noting how his grip lingered just a moment too long. "Consulting work, mostly municipal projects." "Really? I don't think I've seen you around before." "I just moved here from Portland. The development scene there is getting a bit stagnant." I closed the magazine and turned slightly toward him. "Are you working on anything interesting?" For the next hour, Marcus talked about his various projects, painting himself as a visionary who is transforming Seattle's urban landscape. He was charming, articulate, and utterly convincing. If I hadn't known better, I might have been impressed. By the end of the evening, I had his business card and an invitation to lunch the following week. Marcus Holloway was a man who believed he was irresistible to women. He'd built his entire identity around being powerful, wealthy, and charming. It made him predictable, and predictable men are easy to manipulate. Our first lunch was at an expensive restaurant downtown. Marcus played the part of the sophisticated older man, ordering wine, recommending dishes, and regaling me with stories of his importance in the city's development. I played the part of the impressed younger woman, asking the right questions, laughing at his jokes, and letting him believe he was seducing me. "I have to say," he said over dessert, "it's refreshing to meet someone who understands the complexities of urban development. Most people just see the finished product. They don't appreciate the vision and skill required to make it happen." "It must be incredibly satisfying," I said, leaning forward slightly, "to know that you're shaping the future of the city." "It is, though it's not without its challenges. There are always people who oppose progress, who would rather see the city stagnate than embrace necessary changes." I thought about my own company, about the dreams I'd had of creating beautiful, sustainable spaces for people to live and work. Like what? Oh, bleeding heart architects who think every project needs to be a monument to environmental consciousness. Penny-pinching bureaucrats who don't understand that quality requires investment. Sometimes you have to be creative in how you overcome these obstacles. The euphemism made my skin crawl, but I kept my expression neutral. "Creative how?" He smiled and reached across the table to cover my hand with his. "That's a conversation for another time, when we know each other better." I let him hold my hand for a moment, then gently pulled away. I should get back to work, but I'd love to continue this conversation soon. "Tomorrow night? I know a place with excellent steaks and even better wine. I'd like that." As I walked back to my office, I felt a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. Marcus was taking the bait, exactly as I'd hoped. But playing the role of an interested woman was harder than I'd expected. Every smile felt like a betrayal of everything I'd lost, every laugh like a slap in the face of my own pain. But I reminded myself that this was necessary. Marcus had destroyed my life without a second thought. Now it was time to return the favor. Over the next few weeks, I became a regular fixture in Marcus's social circle. He introduced me to his associates, the contractors, the city officials, the businessmen who formed the web of corruption that kept him in power. I was charming, knowledgeable, and most importantly, I appeared to be exactly what I claimed to be: a successful consultant with no connection to Marcus's past crimes. The key was making myself useful. I had genuine expertise in urban development, and I used that knowledge to provide valuable insights to Marcus's projects. I suggested improvements to his proposals, identified potential problems before they became costly, and even helped him secure a few new contracts. "You're remarkable," he told me one evening as we walked along the waterfront. "I don't know how I managed without you." "You're not so bad yourself," I replied, allowing him to put his arm around me. "Though I have to say, some of your associates are interesting." "Interesting how?" "Well, take Jim Morrison. Not the rock star, the contractor. He seems to have a very casual relationship with building codes." Marcus laughed. "Jim's old school. He gets results, even if his methods are unconventional." "And Paul Chen from the planning department. He's awfully accommodating when it comes to permit approvals. Paul understands that progress sometimes requires flexibility in interpretation." I stopped walking and turned to face him. "Marcus, are you telling me that some of your business practices are questionable?" For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Wariness, calculation. Then he smiled. "I'm telling you that business is complicated. Good people sometimes have to make difficult choices to achieve important goals." "What kind of difficult choices?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he made his decision. "Why don't you come to my office tomorrow night? After hours. I'll show you some of the projects I'm working on, and we can discuss the realities of municipal development." I felt a thrill of anticipation. He was going to let me into his inner circle, show me the evidence I needed to destroy him. I'd like that. The next evening, I met Marcus at his office. The building was mostly empty, just a few security guards and cleaning staff. He led me to his office and poured 2 glasses of wine. "To new partnerships," he said, raising his glass. "To new partnerships," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. He walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. "These are the real numbers on the downtown revitalization project, the ones the city council didn't see." I opened the folder and pretended to study the documents. What I saw made my blood run cold. Inflated costs, phantom subcontractors, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. It was a masterclass in municipal corruption, and it represented millions of dollars in stolen taxpayer money. "This is incredible," I said, which was true for entirely different reasons than Marcus thought. "It's how business gets done in the real world. Everyone benefits. The city gets beautiful new buildings, the contractors get paid, the officials get their bonuses, and visionaries like us get the resources we need to keep creating. And if someone objects," Marcus's smile turned cold, "then they learn that objecting has consequences. There was an architect a few years ago, Elena Vasquez. She was talented, but she couldn't see the bigger picture. She thought she could expose our operations, ruin everything we'd built." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was screaming. "What happened to her?" "She went to prison for bribery. Tragic, really. She could have been part of something great, but she chose to be difficult." He moved closer to me. "You're not going to be difficult, are you, Elena?" The use of my real name, or close to it, wasn't accidental. He knew exactly who I was, had probably known from the moment I'd approached him. This wasn't seduction. It was a test. He wanted to see if I'd learned my lesson, if I was ready to be complicit in his crimes. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not going to be difficult." "Good." He leaned down and kissed me, and I let him, even though every fiber of my being wanted to pull away. "I think we're going to work very well together." That night, I went home to my small apartment and sat in the dark for hours, processing what had happened. Marcus knew who I was. He'd known all along. The question was, why had he let me get so close? The answer came to me gradually, like a photograph developing in a dark room. Marcus was a narcissist, but he was also pragmatic. He saw an opportunity to turn his greatest threat into his greatest asset. Who better to vouch for his innocence than the woman he'd supposedly wronged? If Elena Vasquez, now Elena Reyes, was willing to work with him, to be romantically involved with him, then clearly the stories about his corruption were false. I was his insurance policy, his get-out-of-jail-free card. And he thought he was so clever, so irresistible, that he'd managed to seduce me into betraying my own interests. He was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the converted enemy. I attended his meetings, contributed to his projects, and even moved in with him. Living in his house was torture. Sleeping next to the man who'd destroyed my life, pretending to care about his day, listening to him talk about his plans for the future. But it also gave me access to everything I needed. His home office contained files on every corrupt deal he'd ever made. His computer had emails detailing bribes, threats, and cover-ups. His phone had contacts for every dirty politician, crooked contractor, and compromised official in the city. Most importantly, I learned about his offshore accounts. Marcus had been very careful to hide his stolen money in a complex web of shell companies and foreign banks. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd used the same passwords for everything, and he'd written them down in a notebook he kept in his desk drawer. I photographed everything. Bank statements, contracts, emails, financial records. I created copies of electronic files and stored them in multiple locations. By the time I was done, I had enough evidence to put Marcus and his entire network behind bars for the rest of their lives. But exposure wasn't enough. I wanted him to suffer the way I'd suffered. I wanted him to lose everything the way I'd lost everything. The first phase of my revenge was the simplest. I was going to let Marcus's own greed destroy him. I'd learned that he was planning his biggest score yet, a $500 million waterfront development project that would require the demolition of a historic district. The project was crooked from top to bottom, involving fake environmental studies, bribed officials, and phantom investors. Marcus had been planning this for years, but he needed one final element, a respected architect to put their name on the project and provide legitimacy. He'd been courting several firms, but none of them had been willing to take the risk. "That's where I came in. I have a proposal for you," I told him one evening as we sat in his study. "What if I came out of retirement, started a new firm, took on some smaller projects to build credibility, then signed on as the lead architect for the waterfront development?" Marcus looked up from his laptop, intrigued. "You'd be willing to do that?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about the bigger picture, about how business really works. I was naive before, but I'm not anymore. I want to be part of something important." "It would be risky for you. If anything went wrong." "Nothing's going to go wrong. We're too smart for that." He smiled and pulled me onto his lap. "I knew you'd come around. Yes, let's do it. We'll start small. A few residential projects, maybe a small commercial building. Then, when the time is right, we'll announce your involvement in the waterfront project." Over the next few months, I rebuilt my architectural career under my new identity. I took on legitimate projects, hired a small staff, and slowly rebuilt my reputation. Marcus helped behind the scenes, steering contracts my way and vouching for my credibility. It was strange, being an architect again. I'd forgotten how much I loved the work. The challenge of solving complex spatial problems, the satisfaction of seeing a design come to life, the joy of creating something beautiful and functional. For brief moments, I'd forget about my mission and simply enjoy the work. But then I'd remember why I was really doing this, and the rage would return. Finally, 6 months after I'd started my new firm, Marcus deemed me ready for the waterfront project. The announcement was made at a city council meeting, with great fanfare and congratulations all around. I stood next to Marcus as he spoke about the transformative power of the development, about how it would bring jobs and prosperity to the city. "And I'm pleased to announce," he said, "that the project will be led by one of the most innovative architects in the Pacific Northwest, Elena Reyes of Reyes & Associates." The applause was thunderous. I smiled and waved, playing the part of the proud architect about to embark on the project of a lifetime. What the audience didn't know was that I'd already called the FBI. Agent Sarah Chen was a serious woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She'd been investigating municipal corruption for over a decade, and she'd been trying to build a case against Marcus Holloway for years. "Ms. Reyes," she said, as we sat in a small cafe far from downtown, "what you're alleging is very serious. Are you certain about these accusations?" I slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything is on there. Bank records, email communications, financial documents, recorded conversations. 15 years of systematic corruption, documented in detail." She pocketed the drive. "How did you obtain this information?" "Marcus Holloway trusts me. He's been showing me his operations, bringing me into his inner circle. He thinks I'm going to be his partner in the waterfront development." "And are you?" "I'm going to be his downfall." Agent Chen studied me for a long moment. "There's something you're not telling me. Why are you doing this? What's your real motivation?" I'd been expecting this question. "My name isn't Elena Reyes. It's Elena Vasquez. 2 years ago, Marcus Holloway destroyed my life and sent me to prison for crimes I didn't commit. I've spent every day since then planning my revenge." Her expression didn't change. "You're the architect. I remember your case." "Then you know I was innocent." "I suspected it. but we could never prove it. Holloway was too careful, too well connected. She leaned forward. This is about revenge, then. It's about justice. Marcus Holloway has been stealing from this city for 15 years. He's destroyed careers, corrupted officials, and lined his pockets with money that should have gone to schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. He needs to be stopped. And you're willing to testify? To reveal your true identity and admit to the deception? I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Agent Chen nodded slowly. All right, but I have to warn you, this is going to be dangerous. When Holloway realizes what you've done, he's going to be furious. He's going to try to discredit you, maybe even hurt you. Let him try. I have nothing left to lose. Everyone has something to lose. Ms. Vasquez, don't forget that. The FBI investigation moved slowly but inexorably. Agent Chen had to verify every piece of evidence, build cases against Marcus's co-conspirators, and coordinate with other agencies. Meanwhile, I continued to play my role as Elena Reyes, attending meetings, reviewing plans, and preparing for the waterfront development. It was during one of these meetings that I realized Marcus was beginning to suspect something. He'd been watching me more carefully, asking probing questions, and I'd noticed that some of the documents in his office had been moved. Elena, he said one evening as we were having dinner, I've been thinking about the environmental impact assessment for the waterfront project. What about it? It's very thorough, almost too thorough. It identifies problems that most assessments would miss. I kept my expression neutral. I believe in being comprehensive. The section on soil contamination is particularly detailed. It's almost like you have inside knowledge of the site's history. My blood ran cold. I'd made a mistake. I'd included information in the assessment that I'd learned from Marcus's own files, information that Elena Reyes shouldn't have had access to. I did extensive research, I said carefully. The city archives have a lot of information if you know where to look. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course. You're very thorough. That's one of the things I love about you. That night, I lay awake listening to Marcus's breathing, wondering if he'd figured out what I was doing. I'd been so careful, but one small mistake might have blown everything. The next morning, Marcus left for work early. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then went to his office and checked his computer. What I found made my heart race. He'd been researching Elena Vasquez, looking for connections between my old identity and my new one. He knew. I called Agent Chen immediately. We have a problem. Marcus is onto me. We need to move now. We're not ready. We still need to verify some of the financial records, and we haven't located all of the offshore accounts. If we don't move now, there might not be anything left to find. Marcus is smart enough to cover his tracks if he thinks he's in danger. Give me 24 hours. We'll execute the search warrants tomorrow morning. I don't think I have 24 hours. Then be very careful. And whatever you do, don't let him know that you know. That evening, Marcus came home with flowers and a bottle of expensive champagne. He was smiling, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. What's the occasion? I asked. I thought we should celebrate. The waterfront project is moving forward, your firm is thriving, and we're together. Life is good. He popped the cork and poured 2 glasses of champagne. To the future, he said, raising his glass. To the future, I echoed, but I didn't drink. Something about his manner made me suspicious. Drink up, he said, noticing my hesitation. This is a $300 bottle. I'm not really in the mood for champagne. His smile faltered slightly. Come on, Elena, don't be difficult. The way he said my name, with just a hint of emphasis, told me everything I needed to know. He'd figured out who I was, and he was planning to do something about it. You know, I said, setting down my glass, I think I'll pass. I insist. His voice was harder now, more commanding. Drink the champagne, Elena. Which Elena are you talking to? Elena Reyes or Elena Vasquez? The pretense dropped away like a mask. Marcus's face hardened, and I saw the same calculating coldness that I'd seen in his office 2 years ago. I have to hand it to you, he said. You almost had me fooled. The new look, the new identity, the whole seduction routine. Very convincing. Not convincing enough, apparently. You made one mistake. The environmental assessment. You included information that Elena Reyes couldn't possibly have known. Information that came from my private files. I shrugged. Mistakes happen. Yes, they do. And people who make mistakes against me tend to have accidents. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You think you're so clever, playing your little revenge game. But you're the same naive little girl who tried to expose me 2 years ago. And you're going to end up the same way, destroyed. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. You're probably right. But the difference is, this time, I don't care what happens to me. Oh, but you will. You see, I know all about your sister Maria's research grant. I know about your parents' mortgage. I know about your friend Sarah's custody battle. Amazing how quickly things can go wrong for the people you care about. I turned back to him. You're going to threaten my family again? I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect myself. Just like I did before. There's just one problem with that plan, Marcus. What's that? I smiled. I've been recording this entire conversation. His face went white. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him the recording app. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. That's how long I've been planning this. Did you really think I'd come this far without taking precautions? Marcus lunged for the phone, but I was ready for him. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, working out, taking self-defense classes, getting ready for the inevitable confrontation. I sidestepped his charge and brought my knee up into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for breath. I grabbed a vase from the side table and brought it down on his head. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious. I stood over him, breathing heavily, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. This was the man who'd destroyed my life, who'd sent me to prison, who'd stolen millions of dollars from the city. And now he was lying unconscious on his own floor, brought down by the woman he'd tried to destroy. I called 911 and then Agent Chen. Marcus is down. You need to get here now. The arrest was everything I'd dreamed of and more. Marcus regained consciousness just as the FBI agents were reading him his rights. He looked at me with pure hatred, but there was also something else in his eyes. Fear. You think you've won, he said as they led him away in handcuffs. But this isn't over. I have friends, connections. I'll be out in 6 months, and when I am, you'll pay for this. No, I said quietly. You won't be out in 6 months. You'll be in prison for the rest of your life. And I'll be there at every parole hearing, every appeal, every legal proceeding, making sure you never hurt anyone again. The raids on Marcus's co-conspirators happened simultaneously across the city. By the end of the day, 17 people had been arrested, including 3 city council members, 2 state senators, and a federal judge. The corruption network that had taken Marcus 15 years to build was dismantled in a single morning. The media coverage was intense. The story of the corrupt city official and the architect who'd brought him down made headlines across the country. I gave interviews, testified before grand juries, and worked with prosecutors to build the strongest possible case. Marcus tried to fight the charges, hiring the best lawyers money could buy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the financial documents, the testimony from his co-conspirators who'd turned state's evidence, it all painted a picture of systematic corruption that was impossible to deny. The trial lasted 6 months. I testified for 3 days, laying out the scope of Marcus's crimes and the methods he'd used to conceal them. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Several jurors were crying. Marcus was convicted on all charges: racketeering, bribery, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the sentence, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Marcus looked at me one last time, his face a mask of rage and defeat. Then the bailiffs led him away, and I knew I would never see him again. The months following Marcus's conviction were a whirlwind of activity. The city launched a comprehensive investigation into municipal corruption, implementing new oversight procedures and transparency requirements. Several major construction projects were audited, and millions of dollars in stolen funds were recovered. I found myself in an unexpected position. I was being hailed as a hero, a whistleblower who'd risked everything to expose corruption. The mayor offered me a position as the city's integrity officer. The governor appointed me to a commission on government transparency. Architecture firms across the country reached out, offering me lucrative positions, but I turned them all down. I had other plans. I used the money I'd saved from my work as Elena Vasquez to start a new kind of architectural firm, one that specialized in affordable housing and community development. I called it Second Chance Architecture, and our mission was simple: to create beautiful, functional spaces for people who'd been forgotten by the system. Our first project was a housing complex for formerly incarcerated women. Having been through the system myself, I understood the challenges they faced, the difficulty of finding housing, the struggle to rebuild their lives, the constant weight of judgment from society. I designed spaces that were dignified, comfortable, and filled with natural light. Spaces that said, "You matter, you deserve better, you have value." The project was a success, both architecturally and socially. It won several awards and was featured in national publications. More importantly, it helped dozens of women transition back into society and rebuild their lives. My sister Maria's cancer research was finally published, leading to a breakthrough treatment that saved countless lives. My parents paid off their mortgage and retired comfortably. My friend Sarah won custody of her daughter and started a new life in a different city. Everyone I cared about was safe, happy, and thriving. Marcus's threats had been empty, his power illusory. He'd been so focused on his own importance that he'd forgotten the most basic truth. Bullies are only powerful as long as people are afraid of them. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I visited him in prison. The federal penitentiary was a stark, imposing place, all concrete and steel and razor wire. I went through the security checkpoints, submitted to searches, and finally found myself sitting across from the man who'd once controlled my life. Marcus had aged badly. His silver hair had gone completely white, and his face was gaunt and lined. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his diminished frame. He looked old, defeated, broken. "Elena," he said when he saw me. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I wondered if you'd come." I wasn't sure I would. "Why did you? Come to gloat?" I studied his face, looking for traces of the confident, charming man who'd once seemed so powerful. "No, I came to tell you something." "What?" "That I forgive you." He looked at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "What?" "I forgive you, Marcus. For everything you did to me, for everything you stole, for every life you destroyed, I forgive you. I don't understand. I spent 3 years of my life consumed by hatred for you. 3 years planning revenge, plotting your downfall, living for nothing but the moment when I could destroy you. And I did destroy you. I took everything from you. Your freedom, your wealth, your reputation, your family. I won. Then why?" "Because I realized something. The hatred was destroying me too. As long as I carried it, you still had power over me. You were still controlling my life, even from prison. I didn't want to give you that satisfaction." Marcus stared at me for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Do you know what the worst part is? I actually cared about you. In my own twisted way, I thought I was protecting you by forcing you to play along. I thought I was teaching you how the world really works. I know, I destroyed the only person who ever saw potential in me, the only person who might have helped me become something better. You destroyed a lot of people, Marcus. But you also created something." "What?" "Me. The person I am now, stronger, wiser, more determined to make a difference. In a strange way, I owe you for that." He laughed bitterly. "You're thanking me for ruining your life? I'm thanking you for showing me what I was capable of, for teaching me that I was stronger than I ever imagined, for proving that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about making sure the same mistakes don't happen again." I left the prison feeling lighter than I had in years. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Marcus Holloway was finally closed. I could move forward without the weight of hatred dragging me down. My architectural firm continued to grow. We took on more projects: shelters for homeless veterans, community centers in underserved neighborhoods, schools in areas where education funding had been cut. Every project was a small act of rebellion against the system that had failed so many people. I also started teaching. I developed a course at the University of Washington called Ethics in Architecture, where I taught students about the responsibility that comes with the power to shape the built environment. I told them about the importance of integrity, about the consequences of corruption, about the difference between building for profit and building for people. One of my students, a young woman named Rebecca, reminded me of myself at that age: idealistic, passionate, determined to change the world. After class one day, she approached me with a question. Professor Vasquez, do you ever regret what you did? I mean, you could have just walked away, started over somewhere else. Why did you risk everything for revenge? I thought about her question for a long moment. It wasn't about revenge, Rebecca. It was about justice. There's a difference. What's the difference? Revenge is about making someone pay for what they did to you. Justice is about making sure they can't do it to anyone else. But you did want revenge, didn't you? You wanted to hurt him the way he hurt you. I smiled. Yes, I did. And I'm not proud of that. But in the end, the thing that mattered wasn't my anger. It was the good that came from stopping him. The money that was returned to the city. The lives that were saved. The system that was reformed. That's what made it worthwhile. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. Do you think you'll ever see him again? I hope not. Marcus Holloway is part of my past now, and I prefer to focus on the future. Chapter 16. The recognition. 5 years after Marcus's conviction, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from the mayor's office, the new mayor, who'd been elected on a platform of transparency and reform. Ms. Vasquez, the mayor said, I'd like to offer you the position of city architect. It's a new position we're creating. With broad authority over municipal construction projects, the city council voted unanimously to offer it to you. I was flattered, but I had to decline. Thank you, but I'm happy where I am. I understand. But I want you to know, what you did changed this city. The reforms we've implemented, the oversight procedures, the transparency requirements, they're all because of you. You saved this city millions of dollars and restored people's faith in government. After I hung up, I sat in my office and looked out at the Seattle skyline. The city had changed since Marcus's downfall. New buildings were going up, but they were being built honestly, with proper oversight and genuine concern for the community. The waterfront development had been redesigned and built according to proper environmental standards. The historic district had been preserved and revitalized. It was the city I'd always dreamed of helping to create. That evening, I was working late in my office when I received another unexpected visitor. It was Catherine Holloway, Marcus's wife. I hadn't seen her since the trial, and she looked older, more fragile than I remembered. Mrs. Holloway, I said, standing up. This is a surprise. I know you probably don't want to see me, she said, her voice shaking slightly. But I needed to talk to you. I gestured to a chair. Please, sit down. She perched on the edge of the chair, clearly uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize. For what? For not believing you. During the trial, when you testified about what Marcus had done, I thought you were lying. I thought you were just a bitter woman trying to destroy my husband for revenge. You were protecting your family. I understand that. No, you don't understand. I knew. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I knew Marcus was corrupt. I knew he was taking bribes, stealing money. I'd known for years. I stared at her in shock. And you said nothing? I was scared, and I was comfortable. The money, the lifestyle, the status, I didn't want to lose it. I told myself that everyone did it, that it was just how business worked. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I was a coward. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been thinking about you. About what you went through, what you sacrificed to stop him. You lost everything, went to prison, rebuilt your entire life from scratch. And you did it because it was the right thing to do. It was also personal. I wanted revenge, maybe. But you could have just exposed him and walked away. Instead, you've spent the last 5 years trying to make things better. The housing projects, the community centers, the teaching. You're trying to repair the damage he did. I didn't know what to say. Catherine continued. I've been volunteering at a women's shelter. It's the first time in my life I've done something useful, something that actually helps people. I should have done it years ago. It's never too late to start, isn't it? I'm 55 years old, and I've never had a real job. I've never contributed anything to society. I've just been a parasite, living off stolen money. You have knowledge, connections, resources. You could use those things to help people. Like you did? Like you could. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Catherine stood up. I should go. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. Catherine, I called as she reached the door. Your children, Marcus Jr. and Sophie, how are they? They're angry. At him, at me, at the whole situation. Marcus Jr. dropped out of business school and joined the Peace Corps. Sophie is working as an investigative journalist, exposing corruption in local government. They're trying to make amends in their own way. That's good. They're not responsible for their father's crimes. No, but they're living with the consequences, just like you did. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the ripple effects of corruption. Marcus's crimes hadn't just affected his direct victims, they'd damaged his family, his community, everyone who'd been touched by his network of lies and theft. But there were positive ripples too. The reforms that had been implemented, the projects that had been built honestly, the people who'd been inspired to make a difference, those were the consequences of bringing him down. On the 6th anniversary of Marcus's conviction, I was invited to speak at a conference on government transparency. The audience was filled with journalists, government officials, and activists from across the country. 6 years ago, I began, I was a different person. I was naive, trusting, and I believed that the system would always protect the innocent and punish the guilty. I learned the hard way that the system is only as good as the people who run it. I told them about Marcus, about the corruption network, about the long journey from victim to whistleblower to advocate. I talked about the importance of speaking up, even when it's dangerous, even when it's difficult. But I also want to talk about what comes after, I said. Revenge is easy. It's simple, direct, and it feels good in the moment. But it's not enough. Real change requires something more. It requires a commitment to building something better. After the speech, a young journalist approached me. Ms. Vasquez, I'm working on a story about municipal corruption in my city. I think I found evidence of a kickback scheme involving the mayor's office. But I'm scared. These people have a lot of power, and I'm just starting my career. I looked at her and saw myself 6 years ago, frightened, uncertain, but determined to do the right thing. What's your name? Sarah Martinez. Sarah, let me tell you something. The people who benefit from corruption want you to be scared. They want you to believe that they're untouchable, that speaking out will only hurt you. But the truth is, they're only powerful as long as people are afraid of them. But what if they try to destroy me the way they destroyed you? Then you'll rebuild. You'll come back stronger, smarter, and more determined than before. And you'll help other people do the same. I gave her my card. If you need help, call me. If you need advice, call me. If you need someone to testify, call me. You don't have to do this alone. 6 months later, Sarah's investigation led to the arrest of her city's mayor and 3 city council members. She won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting. More importantly, she helped clean up her city's government and restore public trust. She was one of many. Over the years, I've helped dozens of journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens who'd found evidence of corruption and didn't know what to do with it. I've testified at trials, provided expert analysis, and shared my story with anyone who would listen. Now, as I write this story, Marcus Holloway has been in prison for 8 years. He's 67 years old, and according to the reports I receive, he's not adjusting well to incarceration. He's had several health scares, and his appeals have all been denied. He will die in prison, forgotten by the world he once thought he controlled. I should feel satisfied by that. For years, I dreamed of his downfall, planned his destruction, lived for the moment when he would finally pay for his crimes. And he has paid with his freedom, his wealth, his reputation, and his family. But I don't feel satisfied. I feel something else, something I didn't expect. I feel sorry for him. Marcus Holloway was a man who had everything: intelligence, charm, opportunity, resources. He could have used those gifts to make the world a better place. Instead, he chose to use them for personal gain, and in doing so, he destroyed not just his victims, but himself. He's not the only one. In my work over the past 8 years, I've encountered dozens of corrupt officials, crooked contractors, and dishonest business people. Most of them started with good intentions. They wanted to serve the public, build something lasting, make a difference. But somewhere along the way, they lost sight of their principles and began to believe that the ends justified the means. The tragedy isn't just what they did to their victims, it's what they did to themselves. They traded their integrity for money, their honor for power, their souls for temporary advantage. And in the end, they lost everything. People often ask me if I regret what I did. If I could go back, would I choose differently? Would I walk away, start over somewhere else, build a new life without the pain and struggle of seeking justice? The answer is no. I wouldn't change anything, not because I enjoyed the suffering, or because I'm proud of the methods I used. There were times when I did things that I'm not proud of, when I lied, manipulated, and deceived people to achieve my goals. There were moments when I was consumed by hatred, and a desire for revenge that was ultimately destructive. But I wouldn't change it because of what came after. The reforms that were implemented, the corruption that was exposed, the people who were inspired to make a difference, those things wouldn't have happened if I'd walked away. More importantly, I wouldn't change it because of who I became. The woman writing this story is not the same person who walked into Marcus Holloway's office 8 years ago. She's stronger, wiser, more determined to make a positive difference in the world. She's someone who's learned that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention, reform, and healing. That transformation didn't happen overnight. It took years of work, therapy, and self-reflection. It took facing the darkness in my own heart and choosing to channel it into something constructive. It took learning to forgive, not just Marcus, but myself. If there's a lesson in this story, it's not about revenge, it's about resilience. It's about the power of ordinary people to make extraordinary changes when they're willing to stand up for what's right. Marcus Holloway thought he was untouchable. He believed that his wealth, his connections, and his power made him immune to consequences. He was wrong. He was brought down by a single person, a woman he'd underestimated, a victim he'd thought he'd silenced. But I wasn't alone. I had help from Agent Chen, from the journalist who covered the story, from the prosecutors who built the case, from the jurors who delivered the verdict. Justice isn't a solo endeavor. It's a collective effort that requires courage, collaboration, and persistence. That's the real lesson of this story. Not that revenge is sweet, but that justice is possible. Not that the system is perfect, but that it can be reformed. Not that corruption is inevitable, but that it can be stopped. It takes one person to start the process. One person willing to speak up, to take risks, to sacrifice for the greater good. That person can inspire others, create momentum, and ultimately change the world. Today, I'm 42 years old. I run a successful architectural firm that specializes in socially conscious design. I teach at the university, mentor young professionals, and serve on several boards dedicated to government transparency and ethics. I have a small apartment near the waterfront, not far from where Marcus's corrupt development was supposed to be built. Instead of luxury condos for the wealthy, the site now houses a mixed-income community with affordable housing, green spaces, and facilities for local residents. I'm not married. I tried dating a few times over the years, but it was difficult to trust, difficult to open myself up to someone new. The experience with Marcus, even though it was fake, left me wary of romantic relationships. Maybe someday I'll find someone who understands my past and accepts my present. For now, I'm content with my work, my friends, and my purpose. My sister Maria is now a leading researcher in oncology, and her work has led to treatments that have saved thousands of lives. My parents are proud of both their daughters, and they've never once made me feel ashamed of my prison sentence or my methods of seeking justice. Sarah, my childhood friend, has remarried and is happy. Her daughter, who was just a toddler when Marcus threatened her custody, is now in high school and wants to be a lawyer. She says she wants to help people the way I helped her mother. These are the real victories. Not Marcus's downfall, but the lives that were saved, the futures that were protected, the hope that was restored. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the road not taken. What if I'd accepted Marcus's offer 8 years ago? What if I'd become part of his network, taken my cut of the stolen money, and looked the other way? I would have been wealthy, successful, and comfortable. I would have had a beautiful house, expensive cars, and all the material things that money can buy. I would have been respected in my profession, invited to the best parties, and treated as a pillar of the community. But I would have been living a lie. I would have been complicit in a system that stole from the poor to enrich the wealthy, that corrupted the institutions meant to serve the public, that destroyed honest people who dared to speak out. I would have been like Catherine Holloway, comfortable, complicit, and ultimately complicit in great evil. The choice I made was harder, more dangerous, and more painful. But it was also more honest. It allowed me to sleep at night, to look at myself in the mirror, to face my family and friends without shame. It allowed me to become someone I could respect. Marcus Holloway will die in prison. His name will be remembered, if at all, as a symbol of corruption and greed. His legacy will be the reforms that were implemented to prevent others from following his path. My legacy will be different. It will be the buildings I've designed, the students I've taught, the people I've helped. It will be the example I've set, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they're willing to fight for justice. But mostly, it will be the knowledge that I chose to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. This story began with my fall from grace, continued through my journey into darkness, and ends with my emergence into the light. It's a story about revenge, yes, but it's also a story about redemption, resilience, and the power of one person to make a difference. I don't know what the future holds. There will be other Marcus Holloways, other systems of corruption, other battles to fight, but I'm ready for them. I've learned that justice isn't a destination. It's a journey, and it's one that requires constant vigilance, constant courage, and constant commitment. The dish of revenge I served Marcus Holloway was indeed cold. It took years to prepare, and when it was finally served, it was devastating. But the satisfaction it provided was temporary. The real satisfaction comes from the work I do every day, the difference I make in my community, and the knowledge that I've helped make the world a little bit better. That's a dish that never goes cold.